That shows how the cost of this Obama plan is going to end up much larger than has been projected, and that's just one example that has already emerged.
If Michael is right, and I think he is, and I suspect that you agree that he
I don't like corporate welfare.
None of us does, but isn't this going to result in a lessening of the value of shares of stock and a reduction of the number of people employed?
It could,
Isn't unemployment going to go up?
Oh, absolutely, it'll go up. Of course it's going to go up because you're switching so many. It's going to go up in the private sector. The public sector, you're going to see an increase in a lot of bureaucrats, which tax dollars will go to pay for. So all of us are going to have to pay more for bureaucrats who work less hard at a greater salary. By the way, two companies not listed on that list of complainers, General Electric and General Motors, two companies that are very closely tied into the federal government.
Something tells me that they will not be telling their shareholders that their value is going down. More on the Democrats' health care and what it will do to ruin the economy when we come back. Back with me now, Michael Cannon, Director of Health Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, and David Asman, my colleague at the Fox Business Network. There's a very bizarre section in this legislation which calls for the creation of a reserve corps. The president has the opportunity to take some people from the state National Guard and pull them into the federal service, to hire more doctors and have the doctors train to perform some type of indescript service. He talked about this on his way to the Democratic National Convention in July of 2008 when he would receive the Democratic nomination. Listen to what the president said he was looking for.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
David, a civilian national security force just as powerful, just as strong, I'm quoting him now, just as well funded as the Pentagon?
You know, my son would say that. What's up with that? What's up with that? Just as well funded. That's $500 billion. Well, are we going to have two competitive systems, one that is uniquely political? Because, of course, our founders went out of their way to separate the politics from the military defense of our nation. This seems something directly tied into the political sphere.
Michael, does it work when the physicians are actually employed by the government, like in Great Britain? Because this program, this reserve corps that he probably was alluding to in the clip that we just ran, calls for hiring 6,000 healthcare workers and putting in some sort of a military-type organization that can be summoned by the president when he wants them.
Well, we already have a public health service that is like the military in some ways. The people who serve in it are commissioned officers. They have to be approved by Congress. The commissions have to be approved by Congress. And what the legislation would do is it would create a ready reserve corps, which is sort of like to the public health service what the Army Reserve is to the Army. In the case of some pandemic, the president would be able to call for these reservists in order to help contain the spread of contagion. I'm not really sure if that's what he was talking about during that speech.
But I'm not sure what he was alluding to.
He's got to explain something, though, because he says we need something in addition to our military in order to achieve the national security objectives. He's not talking about the Peace Corps, national security objectives. I mean, what is he talking about with that? Why do we need this other army?
All right, Michael, back to you. Does it work when the doctors are employed by the government, or is it a better system when the doctors are private providers of medical services who are reimbursed by either the government or a private insurance company? Which produces a better quality of health care?
I think that medicine always, like everything else, works best when you have a competitive marketplace, where you have freedom to choose, where you have low barriers to entry, where entrepreneurs can offer new and better ways of doing things. But what we're talking about here is how do we halt the spread of contagion? That's really what the public health service is dedicated to. And there can be, I think, some role for government there, but I'm not sure that that should be a federal responsibility. I don't know of any evidence that the federal government would do a better job of responding to public health crises than state governments do. I think this is something that's best left to the states.
When the federal government, David Asman, imposes financial burdens on corporations that they would not choose to take in a truly free market, something I would argue we haven't had since the FDR years, but that's an argument for another time. Can that result in sending jobs overseas?
Oh, of course. It already has. There's this donut chain. What's the name of it? Tom's Donuts, which has just announced that they are going to set up operation in Canada because Canada has a better tax situation than we do in the United States. I mean, this is like 10 years ago, if you said Canada would have a more favorable tax code towards U.S. business than the United States, people would have said you're nuts. But that's what's happening now.
Michael, we have $14 trillion in debt. Does it pay to add more entitlement to that debt?
I don't think so. I mean, one of the main impacts of the Obama law is it's going to explode the deficit. Before it was passed, we heard lots of projections that the cost estimates are based on fantasy. Since that, we've had more people come forward.
And the projections since then are just as bad. Michael Cannon, David
The New Yorker has said that it's going to bust the budget.
You're right. Thanks very much for joining us. A lesson in states' rights you can't afford to miss. Next. This Friday, the moment you've all been waiting for, a chance to ask Glenn anything. Glenn takes the questions you sent in to him. He also takes them from audience members. Here's a sneak peek.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Glenn. How are you?
Good.
Who are your most favorite and least favorite presidents, and why?
Joe Washington, because he was indispensable. Least favorite, Woodrow Wilson. Second least favorite, Woodrow Wilson.
How do we determine who are the progressives and who aren't? Because we need to know before the November election.
This one is really, really simple. Progressives, again, this is the way. Oops. This is the. We were buying really cheap chalk. This is like comedy chalk. This is like those birthday candles that you can't blow out.
That's right here on the Glenn Beck program this Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. One of the most effective ways we have maintained freedom in America is through federalism, the separation of governmental functions between the states and the federal government. The states have the principal governing functions in our everyday lives, and the federal government governs in areas of nationhood and foreign affairs. The framers who set this up wanted to assure that the states could check the feds and the feds could check the states so that the tension between them assured that neither side would gain too much power and destroy individual freedom. This also assured freedom of choice. As Ronald Reagan was fond of saying, in America, you can vote with your feet. If you don't like the laws in one state, you can move to another. This is no longer the case in America, where the government is too oppressive and all the states are the same. This we must change. Good night, America.